Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the largest ever protests against Israel's recognition of Somaliland are organised across Somalia. Our UN team also breaks down the diplomatic condemnation coming out from the UN Emergency Security Council meeting that was organised about the challenge to Mogadishu's sovereignty. Also, a blown tyre and high speeds are behind the accident that left boxer Anthony Joshua counting himself lucky after being injured in a Nigerian hospital. More details are emerging about the Ogun State Highway crash in which two of the former heavyweight champion's friends lost their lives. And Abuja ends the year still unpicking the complex ramifications of the US's airstrikes on alleged extremist camps in Nigeria's northwest last week. But first, countries around the world have come down hard on Israel's unilateral recognition of Somaliland last week. The largest rally to be held since Friday's declaration on Tuesday, tens of thousands of Somalis turned out in protest to the main stadium in their capital, condemning what they see as an attack on their sovereignty. Meanwhile, Turkey, an ally of Mogadishu, slammed Israel's move, calling it illegitimate. Now, Somaliland unilaterally broke away from Somalia in 1991, but that declaration has, until now, had little impact on its official diplomatic status. The UN Security Council called an emergency meeting about the crisis, with more than 20 countries making their disapproval clear. The US, though, was not amongst them. Our Jess Mazurier followed that meeting in New York for Eye on Africa. She gives us the lowdown.
One after the other, UN ambassadors condemned Israel's unilateral recognition of Somaliland during this Emergency Security Council meeting that was held on Monday. They called it a violation of sovereignty and of international law, and some of them described it as morally reprehensible. They also condemned any move by Israel to relocate Palestinians from Gaza to Somaliland. They called for the Council to speak with one voice to counter Israel's actions. Well, the UN's Assistant Secretary General for the Middle East, Asia and the Pacific, Khaled Kiari, said that Israel's declaration was null and void, that it was not legal under international law. Israel tried to defend its recognition of Somaliland, saying that its actions were consistent with international law, but this claim was rejected by almost all of the other council members. Now, Somalia's representative called Israel's recognition of Somaliland an insult. He expressed dismay that Israel, a country which he said is committing genocide, would lecture anyone. He said the rest of the world knows what Israel is up to. The United States was the only council member that did not condemn Israel's move. The Deputy Ambassador criticised this Emergency Security Council meeting, calling it a distraction, and said that Israel has the right to recognise any country it wants. Well, she emphasised, however, that there has been no change in American policy. The United States does not recognise Somaliland. She tried to accuse the Security Council of double standards because many member states have recognised Palestine as a state. But Slovenia's ambassador disputed this comparison, saying that, look, Palestine is not part of any state. It is illegally occupied territory. He explained that Somaliland, on the other hand, is part of a UN member state, and so recognising it goes against the UN Charter.
That breakdown there for us by Jessica Le Mesurier. Now, more details about the fatal accident that left British boxer Anthony Joshua in a Nigerian hospital emerged on Tuesday. The former world heavyweight champion survived a crash in Ogun State in which two close friends were killed. Now, his team says that their car crashed after its front tyre burst as they travelled at high speeds. Our Clarice Fortuné has more.
This is the hospital in Lagos where British boxer Anthony Joshua is believed to be receiving treatment for minor injuries after the crash that left two members of his team dead. Images online show Joshua grimacing in pain as he was helped from the wreckage. For now, the former world champion remains under medical supervision as tributes pour in for the men who lost their lives alongside him. Sina Gami and Latif Ayudele were longtime members of his team.
Honestly, this is one of the craziest, toughest days of my life because, Latif is somebody that I've been extremely close to for nearly a decade. He's one of my best friends. He's one of my inner circle, you know? Yeah, Latif was my friend. I knew Sinna through him. So the small interactions that I've had with Sinna, he seems like an amazing person. But as far as Latif is concerned, he was one of the most pure-hearted, clean-hearted people ever.
The collision happened on Monday morning on a busy Lagos-Ibadan highway. Nigeria's Traffic Compliance Agency says preliminary findings suggest the vehicle was traveling at excessive speed before a front tire burst, sending it out of control and into a stationary truck. The crash has renewed concern over Nigeria's poor road safety record. More than 5,000 people were killed in road accidents last year.
Well, Abuja ends the year still unpicking the complex ramifications of the US's airstrikes on alleged extremist camps in Nigeria's northwest last week. Our Sam Olukoya talks us through the tricky diplomatic and policy balancing act that Nigeria is now facing following Washington's military spectacle, the on-the-ground impact of which still remains unclear.
The United States airstrike in Sokoto State, northwest Nigeria, have divided public opinions about how best the country can address the growing insecurity caused by armed groups. While Nigerians generally agree that urgent steps have to be taken to eliminate the armed groups in the country, there is a debate on whether the United States should be allowed to carry out the task. Some Nigerians say, as a superpower, the United States has what it takes to end a security problem which the Nigerian military has failed to solve in the past 15 years. But there are warnings from some quarters that allowing the United States to bomb targets inside Nigeria amounts to compromising the country's sovereignty. Some Nigerians say even if the country should seek external support, it should not be from the United States. The controversial Islamic cleric, Sheikh Ahmed Gumi, said Nigeria should rather seek military assistance from what he described as neutral countries. In this regard, he suggests countries like China, Pakistan, and Turkey. The cleric said United States involvement in Nigeria will attract anti-US forces who will transform the country into a theater of war. President Donald Trump's position that US military involvement in Nigeria is meant to protect Christians has not helped matters. Critics say such a stance can polarize Nigeria along religious lines. To add to the confusion, 4 days after the airstrikes, Nigerians are unclear about their impacts on the ground. The Nigerian government has not provided any tangible information, preferring to keep the populace in the dark. With reports that the United States is now carrying out surveillance mission in northeast Nigeria, the stronghold of the jihadist group Boko Haram, the possibility of further airstrikes in Nigeria cannot be ruled out.
Sam Olukoya there for us. To Morocco now, and both Tanzania and Tunisia have made it to the last 16 of the Africa Cup of Nations. Tanzania is through as one of the top third-placed finishers after a 1-1 draw with the Carthage Eagles. Now, it's a pretty historic qualification, as Tanzania has not actually ever won a match at AFCON. But the universe has aligned for the Taifa Stars. The other qualifier doesn't have such troubles, though. Nigeria is the only team to have won all 3 group stage matches in this year's tournament. The Super Eagles finished Group C with a perfect record after beating Uganda 3-1 in Fez on Tuesday. But the tournament's thrills aren't just about making it through the stages. Ivory Coast has already made the cut, but faces already eliminated Gabon on Wednesday in a battle of pride. Our Harold Gerard is in Morocco for us.
The Ivorian team locked in its advance through the last 16 after Sunday's draw with Cameroon, but coach MS Faiz says that the Elephants still takes very seriously this final group stage game against Gabon and are very determined to finish top of Group F. The defending champions will chase for the maximum 7 points, but Cameroon is also currently at 4 points and still has a chance to take the lead in that group if it wins its showdown against Mozambique on Wednesday night. The Elephants aren't expecting Gabon's punters to give up without a fight.
We're about to play this game like we weren't already qualified for the final phase, and like Gabon weren't already out. We won't do any calculations. We won't think about the final phase. We're going to play to win. It's as simple as that. We know that every team that plays against us wants to win, whatever's at stake. A friendly game, AFCON, the World Cup, teams want to take us down. So I'm not surprised that Gabon's team said they want to win against us anyway.
Still, it will be a less pressured game than Ivory Coast's previous matches, and a few players like Oumar Diakité, who haven't had much time on the pitch, might get a chance to show their talent. Kickoff is scheduled at 8 p.m. local time at the Grand Stadium of Marrakesh here on Wednesday night.
Harold Girard there for us. That, though, is all we have time for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, though, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.